So how many hours am I going to spend doing this case, chair side, and also pouring up bottles, writing prescriptions, packing up cases, whatever I have to do to get this thing out the door, times my personal hourly operating overhead, which will vary a lot in this room, depending on what your own overhead is. Let's just take some hypotheticals. 6 hours of chair side and lab time in your office to do the case, times a $400 per hour operating overhead. $400 an hour is a very common operating hourly overhead for a general dentist in the USA. If that's the case, $2,400 becomes your overhead cost. And when you add it all up, well, just an example, if your overhead were $100 an hour, it's a lot less, right? But it's not likely that that's what it is. So when you add it all up, you're at almost $4,400 for your case cost to do the case. That's your break-even figure. That's also assuming you get to do the case in no more than 6 hours. If you have some complications or some issues that require you more time, obviously that eats into your profit. So you want to be generous with your estimate for how much time you're going to spend doing the case. Remember also, most of us will service the case for a little while after we deliver for free, and that needs to be factored into that number of hours. Now you've done all the hard work. The only other thing you need to add on to that is profit. You make a personal decision what you want to make per hour on that case, or that type of case. What do you want to make per hour on an overdenture case, on an all-on-4 case? A good starting point is just figure out ballpark. What do you make profit on a crown per hour, on a bridge, on multiple crowns, on a cosmetic case, that kind of thing. Take that figure and either use that, apply that here, or add to it. You know, in my opinion, implant cases deserve a much higher remuneration to the clinician. It's a higher level of dentistry. You need to be compensated for it. You're spending all this time learning how to do it. Some of your colleagues are going to dental town and learning to do it. So, you know, compensate yourself accordingly. Okay. So whatever that would be, that profit would be added to $4,350, and that would become your case fee. This is a universal formula that it applies to anything I do. If I sit down and really think about how long it's going to take me to do something, especially in retreatments or fixing things, if I'm disassembling something and having to redo something, I really want to think about how much time I'm going to spend chairside before I quote the fee. Okay?
Now, you're quoting this for each venture or complete set?
Each venture. Per arch. Another thing to think about, if the patient is dentate and you're taking teeth out and putting them into an immediate denture, are you going to be able to convert that into an overdenture? Well, the answer is maybe so, but probably not. Don't count it. So in those cases, I'm quoting an additional immediate denture fee on top of this fee. Okay, questions? So profit, number of hours, chairside lab, we hypothetically determined 6 hours times whatever number, that's your decision, whatever number you want to make profit per hour, add that to your case costs.
For the dental patient, you take teeth out, they've got a intervention, 6 month waiting time, blah, 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 blah. Share side realize.
Academy.
I don't understand.
Yeah. You know, you're probably pretty safe in considering 3 relines. And it may not take that many. Okay. Okay. Okay, one more thing before we get into all the fours. Just change the whole complexion up here a little bit. Let's think about bridge work, fixed bridge work on implants. And this can get really confusing, especially when you're looking at your lab costs and your fee determination. But what I distill it down to, what I want to be able to do is to make, pardon me, excuse me. I want to be able to make a zirconia bridge, milled zirconia, screw retained. Because that's basically what I do with implant crowns, anterior and posterior. All zirconia posterior. Anteriors could be an Emax or zirconia with a porcelain cutback. But what I've come to love is my all milled zirconia screw retained restorations. Well, if you've done some of those, has anybody done those with Glidewell, done Bruxer implant crown screw retained? Yeah. Well, in a Bruxer screw retained implant crown, the milled zirconia is bonded to a metal titanium insert, which is all fine. So you put the crown in and you screw it in as one unit. But the lab has it as 2 units, a titanium base, a milled zirconia. What Nobel has come out with is their own titanium base that the milled zirconia crown or bridge bolts to. It does not bond to the titanium base. And that's a big advantage. Because in the out time, if I need to add contact or porcelain chips or something happens, I can unscrew that zirconia mill and I've still got my base intact. We could add it to a contact here or do mostly anything we want to and still preserve the crown. With a Bruxer crown, it's bonded. You can't do that. You can't separate that titanium base without destroying the crown. You can't throw that in an oven and add a contact without heating up the titanium base, and it damages that base. So, that led to this case. It hasn't been too long, maybe a year or so, that Nobel has come out with the angle screw channel, screw retained, all zirconia bridge. So that's what I did with this particular patient. This was a new patient to me. I've known him for a long time, but he had another general dentist that unfortunately passed away. And I inherited this patient, and this is the way he was. So what he actually has here is a cantilever 6 and 7, cantilevered into 7, and a 3-unit bridge on 8 through 10. Loose cantilever bridge here on 6 and 7, loose bridge, 3-unit bridge here with recurrent decay throughout. Old post and cores. I mean, that stuff lasted for 35 years. He got his money's worth. He's happy with it. But he's finally breaking down. He's a perfect example of a baby boomer now, who was well restored throughout their life, our lives. Gold crowns, porcelain fused metal crowns, whatever it might be. Well, now we're getting in our late 60s, 70s, and 80s. It's inevitable. A lot of this stuff is going to break or break down. So all of that's got to come out. 6 through 10 has got to come out. I asked him, why don't we go ahead and go over to 11 and put a blue crown on it and kind of make everything look uniform. He said, no, it's costing me enough to do this as it is. So he limited me to 6 through 10. 3 implants, 6, 8, and 10. I'm going to make a 5-unit anterior bridge. Now, I love EMAX. Probably a lot of you have used EMAX throughout your interior work and Empress. And it's great looking, but it's not as strong as Mills Zirconia. And it worries me about making an EMAX bridge and putting that in and asking that to last for another 10 years or 15 years, or however he's going to live. So we're going to get the implants put in place. We're going to put him into a laboratory fabricated provisional bridge, screw retained, and then make the final. Because we're going to make an all zirconia framework, you treat that just like you do an all-on-4 milled titanium framework. It's got to fit. You can't cut that framework and solder it or laser weld it if it doesn't fit. So we make an open tray impression to get as accurate a master model as we can. And then we also confirm the accuracy of that model with an acrylic verification jig, an AVJ. And I'll be showing that with the all-in-4 cases. But let me go ahead and just mention, what we do with an AVJ is we take that acrylic bridge, which has titanium abutments contained in it. We take that to the mouth and we confirm that it fits exactly like it does on the model.
Have you already taken an impression?
Yeah, that's the master model.
You do an open tray or closed tray?
Open tray.
So I make the jigs with my impression coatings and then take my master model.
Perfect, that's fine too. That's a very good way to do it. Either or. Yeah. In this case, I'm making my master impression, and then I'm just checking it with an AVJ. When we put it in the mouth, the proper use of the AVJ is to put one screw in on one end. One screw here, no screws over here. And we confirm by pushing down across the length of the AVJ that it doesn't move, that it doesn't bounce. If it satisfies that test, we take that one screw out, put it over here, and do the same thing in the opposite direction. Odds are pretty good on a short span with an open tray impression, especially like I'm going to show you with an all-in-4. Odds are pretty good that it's going to fit. But you want to make sure it does, because if you go in and mill that zirconia and there's a gap there and it doesn't fit, you start all over. You just bought a zirconia framework. Provisional bridge. So one of the nice things I can confirm from this is I know I can get my screw access channels basically placed through the lingual cingulum surfaces. So this is lab produced, and within what I've done is picked up titanium abutments in the hollowed out portions of the temporary bridge. So those are angle screws from Nobel as well. And we get some idea as to what we want to use as far as length and contour in the final. So there's the temporary bridge in place. And you would see the same look on your AVJ with titanium coatings. Now here was my major prosthetic decision. So I love the strength of zirconia, because I've done it a lot in the posterior. But I'm nervous about an all zirconia mill in the anterior. How's it going to look? Because the ones that I've done with single crowns have looked pretty opaque. They're just not as pretty as my EMAX. So what we decided to do is make all of the contacting surfaces, the lingual surfaces, all milled zirconia. A slight cutback on the facial and slightly over the incisal edge in EMAX porcelain. So we pretty much get the aesthetics of an EMAX look. Maybe a little deader look, that's not the right word, maybe a little more opaque, but still very acceptable. Now, you saw this guy, he's basically my age, he's a good old boy. You know, he's not gonna be on the cover of GQ. And he's not my 32-year-old female who looks at every nook and cranny in a cosmetic case. Not that he's not discriminating, but he's not as discriminating as some cosmetic cases might be. So all I've got to do is get it pretty good, and he'll be fine. That's the Nobel titanium base. So that whole bridge bolts to those 3 titanium bases. There's no cement whatsoever there. When you put it in the mouth and take it out, it's possible that those little titanium bases will pull out of the zirconia. You just pull them back out and screw them back together and go back to place. What if we need to modify? That titanium base can be separated from the rest of the bridge. Of course, they're non-engaging because we're splinting everything together. So these are conical connections, tapered implant conical connections, so they just fit directly to the platforms of the implants. They don't go down internally and engage. And a final look, screw access opening sealed with Teflon tape underneath composite. Layers zirconia, of course. So I commit that to your thinking. It's a little pricier than, for example, just your old PFM type of work. But I think you get a better look. You get the advantages of strength of zirconia. You move out of the porcelain fused metal world into the zirconia world. And the 4 on the left, after on the right. If and when you do this, or even if you're doing single implant crowns that are zirconia milled, be sure and have a very good, long conversation with your lab. I did this with a lab in California, Micro Dental Lab, Dublin, California. They have about 6 different ways of doing this, and pricing varies in each different way. They also have different teams that work on these types of cases with pricing differently. So you really have to pay a lot of attention to the lab quotes before you quote the fee to the patient. And just to throw this in, what we've learned is that your guideline, suggested guideline now for torquing your screws in, you torque it to whatever the manufacturer recommends. Nobel Biocare recommends 35 centimeters for that screw. You torque it to 35, you untorque it, and you retorque it. By torquing, you spread you stretch the screw threads. Untorquing, relax, and then you torque it again. The old recommendation when I was growing up with implants was torque it in, torque the screw in, walk away for 15 minutes, come back and torque it again. That evidently does nothing for thread stretch. But the torque, untorque, retorque is the current recommended method. And then as you'll see here, how many times can you replace a screw? Can you torque a screw? Can you loosen a screw? 5 times. And then you need to replace it. A lot of the labs will send you a lab screw and a pristine new screw to put it in. And that's a great thing if you get that from them. You want to make sure that you don't use the lab screw or your final screw. Okay. Screws are expensive. Multi-unit abutment screws are almost $100 a piece. So you want to loosen and re-screw as infrequently as you possibly can. And throwing this out also, all of your codes are right there, CDT code book and the CDT companion book. And I would strongly suggest that you have multiple copies in the office. I have at least 3, because I've done this forever, and I still go back to those code books all the time, confirming what code am I going to use for this particular, for certain procedures that you don't do every day, all day. This will look pretty familiar to the slides you already have, but I'll put some on a flash drive and give them to John Ramirez, and he can distribute everything that I've gone over today. We talked about this earlier. What's the most expensive case you do, which is the bar overdose. We're going to focus on all 4 here. Noble Bowel Care has pretty much branded that technique. Tens of thousands of these cases have been done, and all the other implant companies have mimicked the all-in-4. They all have their all-in-4 type of procedure to be done. What is all this all-in-4? Basically, it consists, if there's still just 4 implants, of the 2 anterior implants and about the cusp sites being placed in a vertical position, but the 2 posterior implants being tilted posterior. So in the maxilla, we can avoid a sinus event. But the posterior part, the posterior platform of the implant emerges generally underneath the sinus. And on the lower arch, it crosses over the mental foramina and gives us a greater anterior-posterior spread. As we mentioned earlier, it could be 5 or 6 implants or even more, depending on the case. But 4 is the most common number that we see. So 2 anterior vertical implants, 2 posteriors that are tilted. At the same time, surgically, multi-unit abutments are applied. John, did we get the boxes yet?
Not yet.
Yeah. Multi-unit abutments are applied to the implants. And those come in various angulations, 17 and 30 degree angulations, that allow us to pretty much parallel up the path of insertion for whatever prosthesis we're putting in. All this generally goes on at a single surgical appointment. Teeth are removed, implants are placed, multi-unit abutments are placed, and then a denture is converted to a temporary all-in-4. In order to convert the denture, titanium abutments are now connected into the multi-unit abutments. The multi-unit abutments will stay in the mouth. The titanium abutments will be incorporated into a denture. They're cut off for length, and there's some steps that'll be sort of cut out here, but eventually a denture that has been pre-made, an immediate denture, holes are cut in that to expose the titanium cylinders. And those cylinders will be picked up inside the denture acrylic. We're going to illustrate in the video using a light-cured material, but you or your surgeon can use plain old cold cure methyl methacrylate. Either way, light-cured or self-cured. Again, injecting some light-cured material around the titanium cylinders here. Light curing those, and then once that material is cured, screws for the cylinders are unscrewed, the whole denture comes out. From a previous face gold bag registration and an impression inside the denture, chair side, we can